To become a writer, to have launched into writing, it begins, I think, with a certain facility of just writing essays in school. And you think, oh, this might be good. Maybe I should teach English, or I could write English, and that essay wasn't so hard to write, and maybe I'll try to write a short story. But I'm going to admit right off the bat that to get into the writing, at first, it came from a kind of a awkward and probably not particularly defensible way. In my family, frankly, because of my pretty eminent grandfather, of General George S. Patton, there was a consciousness of that fame is out there, and that fame has a sort of a romantic appeal. And General Patton himself had this same sense that fame, that notoriety, that gallantry had preceded him, and he as well wanted to meet it and exceed it. This was in our household, along with this very quiet side of reading books, where what will you do to be famous? Because your grandfather was famous, well, surely you must have the same thing in you. And it was, my parents were really great about it, but they sort of suffered under the same sense of themselves as somewhat being challenged to leave a mark, to go somewhere, to have people remark upon you when you entered a room. All those things which I like to think we learn over time are pretty fleeting and ultimately pretty unnecessary to real fulfillment. But nevertheless, that was in my mind, and I'll never forget, I knew that the military specifically wasn't for me, but what would be my route to romantic fame, as I thought. And I don't know if it was late high school or probably early college, I picked up This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I believe it was published when he was 24. About his Princeton years, his period in the Army. And of course, it was an instant, huge bestseller, and it created the young F. Scott Fitzgerald that we all think of now as sort of having been born brilliant and then gone downhill from there in a very tragic and appealing way to a young, aspiring writer. Dead of alcoholism at 44, why not? He wrote great books. What else do you want in life? That's how it appeared, and I thought, okay, this is for me. I'm going to go, and I'm going to write my This Side of Paradise, and I'm going to be a famous person, and it will only take until I'm 24, and all will be done, all will be well. And that was my plan. And when I got out of college, I'd gone to graduate school and looked like I might go into sort of a more straightforward journalism career, and covered the agriculture department in the Midwest and whatnot. But there was this idea, this isn't, and again, I say this with embarrassment, this somehow isn't good enough, isn't grand enough. I've got to go write a masterpiece. And I was going to write it in fiction, that was my plan. And so off I went and moved down into the Caribbean and knocked around for about 6-8 months. Then moved to Nantucket Island, Massachusetts. Worked as a carpenter and a commercial fisherman, all while writing and all while fully expecting that any day now I'd be done. Editors would clamor for my manuscript. It would be, of course, brilliantly received, and I would be, as I'm supposed to be in this family I was born into, I would be famous very soon. It's funny, I can't say I'm glad it didn't happen, but it didn't happen, and it's probably well for the best that it didn't happen. And I wrote, it took me about 7 years to finish my first novel, which is ridiculous in a way, because if I'd followed a more honest track of just writing something maybe autobiographical, something that really mattered, but I was trying to adhere to it, what I thought was fashionable, what I thought was certainly going to sell, not in a kind of popular fiction sort of way, but as accepted classics are written with great poetry, great language, and great sort of internal conflict. I was bringing it in, and it wasn't all there in me yet, so I was kind of sticking on little pieces as one puts plaster on a paper mache statue, hoping it would fill into something grand. Anyway, at the end of that period, I did find ultimately in my early 30s some publishers for the first 2 fictions that I wrote. Loved them, loved the process, but it just seemed that wasn't working out, and I should think about just using the craft of writing, because believe it or not, when you do practice it, even if you're writing dialogue in a novel, you're putting words on the page, you're thinking about pacing, you're practicing your craft without even knowing it. And when I did do as my first book, and again, I say this somewhat shamefacedly, editors had said, publishers said, you must write about the man everyone wants to read about that you obviously have an affiliation to, General George Patton. And initially I'd said, this is not right, this is sort of a low track to where I want to get. Too easy, maybe. But then I kind of sidled up to the idea from the side of doing it in terms of a broader memoir. I had a few relatives, older, some that I was very close to, that specifically my father's sister, my aunt, born in 1915, when she was a very young girl, had, out of her love for genealogy and history, had queried all of her elderly ancestors for letters, for shoeboxes of memories, for photographs if they were available at that time. And so she passed on to me this archive of family history in which the famous general showed up in her girlhood and became the elephant in the room in terms of the family. But that would be my way of bringing it into this story. So I wrote a family memoir, and it actually was really beneficial for me because without knowing it, I was also working out a few of my own issues with what the hell this guy was about. Wonderful, original man, proud to be descended from him, but clearly a flawed man, clearly a man that anyone who really appreciates humanity and appreciates real greatness understands that it comes over challenges of character and flaw, and he was full of that. And on the one hand, I maybe was a little wiser to understand that, but also had gained enough of senses of self where I could talk about it, think about it, articulate it to myself, to others, without feeling somehow that either that was a cheap way of getting attention for myself or was a waste of my time, and it was neither. And so I was very proud to have written that memoir, and then from there I did return to fiction for a while, and then wrote a book that just came to me on a whim about the revolution, and now, lo and behold, long answer to a short question, wrote a book about journalism and have enjoyed it thoroughly.